Good evening, Eric Bancroft here, coming to you on behalf of the Clarity Crew. It's later in the day now. We're having time together, an extended time of the Word, our anchored devotion. This week, as you've been hearing these videos from us, we've been talking about just reflecting on the implications of the resurrection. This past Sunday, in all of our local churches around the world, Christians were celebrating the fact that the tomb is empty. That unlike, as Kurt was talking about with the different evidences of the resurrection, unlike these other people from other religions and dynamic backgrounds or where they came from, where those tombs are occupied, the tomb of the leader of Christianity, Jesus of Nazareth, who was nothing less than the Son of God himself, is empty. And we've been reflecting on that this week. Well, tonight, I want to talk to you about the resurrection's relationship to doubt. Now, there are some people who doubt out of a desire for defiance. They do not want to respond to the historical claims and support for the resurrection of Jesus because they do not want to surrender their lives to Christ. And it'd be easier for them to just miss it, to not even wrestle with the historical validity of it, because their doubt is rooted in their desire to defy God, to rebel against him, to perpetuate their desire for their lack of submissiveness to him. But that's not the doubt I want to talk to you about tonight, though that could certainly be a topic for discussion. The doubt I want to talk to you about tonight is the doubt of disappointment. For those of you who are watching this who are Christians, there is no doubt, no pun intended, that God has not done and has not acted and has not provided in ways that maybe you believe he should have. You know him to be powerful, you know him to be wise, you know him to reveal himself as good, and yet practically in your life, you've not always seen that deliver on the ways you think that it should have. And you maybe have struggled with doubting God. Friends, if that's a true expression of the honesty and the transparency of your heart, I'm here tonight to tell you you're not alone. That doubt is common. That doubt is not one in defiance. It's a doubt based on disappointment. Disappointment that God was not who you thought him to be, that things did not go like you expected. Well, tonight, I want us to talk about the Apostle Thomas, the disciple of Jesus known as Thomas. We know him as one of the 12, one of the chosen ones that Christ called to him to follow him. And after Jesus' crucifixion, Thomas, like others, scattered. He was in disbelief. How could this have happened? How could all of this have taken place? If Jesus was who he said he was and who seemingly he proved himself to be with his, not only his profound words, as even it says in Matthew 7 that no one spoke like him, no scribe or Pharisee. But it wasn't just that, it was Jesus' power over disease, his ability to do things against the demonic kingdom that had never been seen before, that he had to surely be the Son of God. And yet, to his surprise, he was arrested. He was tortured. He was crucified. What kind of salvation plan is this? This is not what I expected. This is not what I would have hoped for. This was not what I was telling other people it was hopefully going to be like. And he's buried. This did not go the way I expected. Have you ever felt that way about how God has acted in your life? Well, that's exactly how Thomas felt. So later on, after Jesus has resurrected, there is the story that it's made its way to Thomas. And then the record is given in John chapter 20, where it says in verse 24, "Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger in the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe.'" Now, This is perhaps lost on a lot of us today, exactly what he's asking for here. And what he's asking for here is specifically proof that it's him. Now, why is it so significant? Because crucifixion would have the nails in the hands, specifically sort of in the wrist bone area. It would have it in the feet. But normally, this would be a slow, excruciatingly multi-day death process, which, unless it was needed to be accelerated, the person would just eventually suffocate and die. And if they had to accelerate the death, then the soldiers would come and they would crush the shin bones of the person who's being crucified. And then they could not support themselves anymore, and they would collapse and suffocate more quickly and die. But as you remember in the crucifixion account of Jesus, he gave up his spirit and he died. He surrendered his life and he died. There was no breaking of his bones. And so that when the soldiers came in disbelief he was dead, they pierced his side to make sure he had died. Jesus's wound in his side was unlike any other crucified person. It would mark for Thomas. It really was Jesus. He has had his doubts and he's had his disappointments. Notice what happens next in John 20. 8 days later, his disciples were inside again and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Now, what happens next is that Thomas doesn't do as he said he wanted to do or do as Jesus offered him to do. Thomas simply sees and hears and he believes. Because it says there in verse 28, Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." His faith was restored. It was not what he expected, but it was so much more than he imagined. And it goes on to describe that. And later on, a few verses later, John, the writer, says, "These things are written so that you, the reader, may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." Friends, God is used to having followers of him doubt him because he acts in a way that they did not expect. But God in his mercy offers himself to his people with a continued loving display of who he is, of what he has done. And as they see that, they believe and their faith is restored. I encourage you tonight, in the aftermath of the historical annual celebration of the resurrection of Christ, what we refer to as Easter's Resurrection Sunday, that if any of you are struggling, friends, where do you go to find that? You go to where John says, you go to the Word of God to have your faith restored in God, that he is doing a work in your life for your good and his glory. May that encourage you tonight and the days ahead as you reflect on the resurrection. This is Eric Bancroft on behalf of the Clarity Crew signing off. I hope you have a great night and a wonderful start tomorrow morning. See you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for our next 2-minute drill.